Hi everyone, welcome to this week's tutorial on crochet rings. It's a very exciting little project. This week's tutorial we're just going to be covering the basic ring bands and how to make some of the standard components, and then in the weeks to come we're going to be building on these. So this week we've just got three funky little rings to start with, get you into the swing of things, and then we'll be building on this. Start our first ring band by doing short rows, and you're going to be doing about 20 rows of 4 crochet stitches. The reason we're only doing 4 stitches is because we're going to do a band of color on either side of this ring. Otherwise, if you wanted to do a straight ring band using just this one stitching technique, then you could do up to 6 stitches in a row, but for today we're just going to stick to the 4. So start by doing a chain of 5 stitches, chain 5. Then in the second stitch from your hook, do a single crochet and single crochet into each of the next 3 stitches. So you'll end up with 4 stitches in a row. Then you need to chain 1, turn your work, and do another 4 stitches, and just keep going this way, doing row by row until you have approximately 20 rows. You need to just measure as you go, because obviously the 20 rows will be dependent on the size of your hook, the size of the thread that you're using, and also the size of your finger. So there's a lot of different factors to factor in here, but I'm using a 2.5 size hook, and I'm using a number 5 crochet thread, and with that I do a 20 rows for my finger sizes, but like I say, this is all determined by the materials that you've chosen to make your ring out of. So once the crochet ring band has got as long as you need it to be, you want to cut your thread from your main ball, leaving about a 15 centimeter thread tail to stitch in order to stitch your ring together. So finish off your last stitch, and then you need to tuck in the short end, the beginning end of your thread. So tuck that in amongst your stitches. You might want to maybe even just tuck it to the inside of the ring so that it won't show on the outside. So in order to do the color bands on either side of the rectangular ring band that you've just crocheted, you want to hook your new color into the first space in the row. Now you're going to be stitching at a sort of 90-degree angle to the rows that you've just made. So you'll be really stitching down the length of the long rectangle. So chain 1 and then single crochet into each gap between the rows as you get down to the end, down the length of the rectangle. So when I'm making the bands of color on either side of the ring, I like to work over my initial starting thread, just to keep it covered so I don't have to tuck it in later. This is purely a personal preference thing. It's equally easy to tuck it in when you finish doing your band of color. I'm literally just trying to save myself a few minutes of time. So if you're not experienced enough at crochet to understand what I mean when I say this, just leave it out, and you can always just tuck in the start and end threads once you've finished your band of color on either side. When you get to the end of the one side of the rectangle, cut a short tail that you can tuck in, and then proceed to just repeat on the other side. So you've got 2 stripes of color, or a stripe of color on each side of your main crochet ring band. So tuck in all the short ends from the color bands that you've just made on the side of the long rectangle, and then you take your 15cm thread tail that you left from the main color and use that to ladder stitch the long rectangle together to form the actual crochet ring band. Alright, now we get to the central crochet circle. So wrap your crochet thread around the top of your little finger about 20 times. Not too tight, you don't want to stop your circulation, but just enough times to make a nice ridge of thread. Then, with the threads wrapped still on your finger, tuck your crochet hook under these threads, wrap your yarn around, and then form one single crochet. So, and then you proceed to do single crochet around all these wraps of thread. So it's a little weird to start with, but you'll get used to it. And as you're going, about every 10 or so stitches, you want to stop and then just push your stitches together to make sure that they're forming a nice dense row of stitches going all around the circle. So this will help with any of the thread wraps that you did that might want to pop up to the top. This will help to keep them underneath the stitches. If any of them do pop up, then you can always just use your crochet thread just to go underneath all your stitches and pull them down again. But if you keep your stitching tight and very close together, or tightly together, should I say, then you shouldn't have any of these little weird extra threads that pop up from underneath, from the wraps popping up to the top. And it should just form a nice neat crochet circle. So just to put in a quick apology about the change of color thread there. The video I made with the purple thread, I ended up filming half of it off the screen. So yeah, to redo it. And I was making a ring with the green center. So I filmed with the green center, but hopefully you can still follow what's happening. Cool. If you're going to be proceeding to version 3, where we actually use this crochet circle as the center of the flower, then you want to make sure that you have the amount of stitches going around the outer edge of the crochet circle is divisible by 4, because it requires 4 stitches to create one petal. I usually do about 24 stitches around the circle using a 1.75 hook and a number 5 crochet thread. But this will obviously vary according to whatever materials you've decided to use for your rings. So once we've finished our crochet circle, you want to make sure all your stitches are lying neatly next to each other and they're looking as good as they can. Then you thread up your 15cm tail that you left on from the crochet circle. Thread it onto your tapestry or your wool needle, and then you want to stitch that down onto your ring band. I like to stitch mine over the join on the ring band, so that way the join is completely covered and it's not visible from when you look at the ring afterwards. So in order to stitch this crochet circle on, you're able to bring your thread to the back and then just gently weave in and out of the stitches, obviously making sure that at no point does your tapestry or your wool needle come to the top of the ring, but for the rest of it, just stitch neatly in and out as securely as you can. Okay, so the other style of ring band that we make is a horizontally stitched ring band. So whereas our first ring band was done 4 stitches of about approximately 20 rows, this time around we're going to do anything from 15 to 18 stitches in a row and do 3 or 4 rows of that, and then stitch the band together as we did in the first variation, and that'll give us a horizontally stitched ring band, which is slightly less stretched than the vertically stitched ring band. So it's all a matter of preference. Just see what works for you. So the amount of stitches that you need for this horizontally stitched ring band is determined by the hook size, your thread size, and of course the size of your finger. So for the central pistils of the flower, you want to have quite compact stitches. So I recommend using a hook size that's 1 size smaller than the size you used for the ring band. So to start, you hook your thread through the middle stitch of the join on the ring band that you just made. Then you need to chain 5. Now you're going to form a popcorn stitch. So you go yarn over, then you push your hook into the 3rd chain from the hook, yarn over, pull your hook through the stitch, then yarn over and pull through 2 loops. You'll now be left with 2 loops of thread on your hook. Stop there for that stitch. Okay, now you want to repeat this 3 more times, and you should end up with 5 loops on your hook. Now you go yarn over, you pull through all loops on that hook, and then you chain 1, and that's how you make a popcorn stitch. So now we want to make those stitches into a nice little ball. So we're going to slip stitch into the loop of thread that you can see at the bottom of the popcorn stitch that you just made. And this will give you that nice little ball of stitches. And now you just want to single crochet into the last 2 stitches of your initial chain, and then you slip stitch back into the stitch that you started your chain from. Now, depending on the flower that you're making, you can either leave it with 1 pistil, or you can repeat this 2 or maybe even 4 times if you want your flower to have 3 or 5 pistils. So once you've finished your pistils, be them 1, 3 or 5, whichever you like, you only need to cut a short thread tail, just long enough to tie together in a granny knot and tuck your threads in. I don't do this in the back of the ring so that it's hidden from sight. Yeah, so cut your threads, pull them to the back, tie yourself a little granny knot, and then tuck your thread ends in underneath all your other stitches to hide them nicely. Right, so now it comes to the part where we're going to put our rings together. Well, our ring together, should I say? So we've done a crochet circle as we did in the first variation, and we've got our pistils that are coming out of the ring band. So you want to tuck those pistils through the central hole of the crochet circle, and then using your wool needle, you want to stitch your crochet circle down onto the main ring, just like we did in version 1. So for the last version of this ring, we're going to be adding petals to our crochet circle. So remember how if you want to add your petals, you need to have the stitches being in a multiple of 4 going around the crochet circle. So to start with, we add our new color. We chain 1, and that's acting as your first half double crochet in this first petal. Then in our next stitch, you're going to do one double crochet, chain 3, and then a second double crochet, all terminating in the same stitch. And then your next stitch, you're going to have a half double crochet, and then the following one a slip stitch, and that's going to form your first petal. To form your next petal, in the very next stitch, you do one half double crochet. In the following stitch, you again do one double crochet, chain 3, another double crochet, and then in the next stitch, you do one half crochet, and then between your petals, you have one slip stitch. So you'll be using 4 stitches in order to form one petal. So repeat this going all the way around. If you started with 24 stitches, which is what I generally tend to end up with, then you'll have made 6 petals going all the way around. And that's it for this week's 3 crochet rings. Like I say, I'm already working on next week's tutorial, as this is a very exciting little project that we've got happening here. So I hope you'll join me for that. As always, to keep the channel alive, please like this video, and please would you consider subscribing and even sharing this video with others so they can also share in the fun of making awesome little funky crochet rings. Have a good week, guys. See you next week.